It's a big day, folks. Here we have the third iteration of the Mavic 3 and it has 3 cameras on it. Are you going to want it? Yes, of course you're going to want it, but do you need it? Is it worth the money? Is there value here? Well, let's look at some facts and figures and hopefully answer those questions for you in this video. Stewart here, pleasure to talk to you as always. We've got quite a lot to unpack here. Go and grab yourself a copy of our drone comparison chart in the link below to help you decipher some of these statistics. We're not going to rehash old ground here because physically we have basically the same Mavic 3 that we got in November 21, I think it is, and then a little while ago with the Mavic 3 Classic. This is the same drone. It's the camera that is different in terms of physical characteristics. What has changed is we have a bigger, heavier camera, which means flight time is reduced by about 3 minutes, and the drone itself is a touch heavier. The entire conversation today concerns the cameras on this drone. Do you value the addition of 2 telephoto cameras in addition to the 4/3 camera that sits underneath, which I think we've established by now is very, very good. The third camera in this array you will be somewhat familiar with. It's the 7x zoom. Now, it's not a zoom, it's a fixed focal length telephoto lens with 166mm equivalent field of view. It's very similar to the original telephoto lens that came on the Mavic 3 that was released 18 months ago, only this time we've got an improvement in terms of a wider aperture, f3.4 versus f4.4. Very welcome, and in particular an unrestricted set of software in there so we can manually control our exposure. We've got full selection of frame rates, 24, 25 frames per second, so on and so forth. So a fully functioning camera, if you will. The completely new piece of the puzzle is the medium telephoto lens, which gives us a 70mm equivalent field of view, roughly 3 times zoom over and above the wide angle that sits underneath. And that takes us right into telephoto territory. The question you have to answer is, do you value the increased creative opportunity that telephoto lenses give you in an aerial filmmaking and photography context? From our perspective, this is our dream come true. I've salivated over these old school parallax aerial shots that have been done with helicopters, gyro stabilized cameras, tremendous fields of view to get close to subjects because you can't get a helicopter 1 meter away from a subject. So this is giving us the opportunity to do something that is akin to classic aerial cinematography. Yes, for me, I want this. I want to tell you what this drone is like to use from a professional perspective. What do professionals value? Reliability, ease of use, dependability, certainty of outcome. In the case of aerial cinematography, stability in hostile conditions, given that we cannot control the weather. Any Mavic 3 is going to give you all of those things. The drone itself is outstanding. That's tried and tested. We know that by now, but it's worth reiterating and it's worth understanding. There's no bigger fan here on planet Earth of the Mini 3 Pro than me, but at the top of a mountain in Scotland, it's not going to get the job done. You need something like this. Now let's talk about using this triple camera system from a professional perspective. If possible, I want as seamless an experience changing between those 3 cameras when it comes to shooting on the day at the time of image capture and in terms of processing that footage in post. That's what I want. So in an ideal world, we have 3 cameras with identical specifications and identical color profiles and identical characteristics. That's not what we get. So I want to take you through in detail the implications of any differences here and how you can work with that system. The light gathering capability of these 3 lenses is quite different, primarily because we have hugely different sensor sizes, also because the tele lens sits within f3.4 versus f2.8 for the medium tele and f2.8 when wide open on the Hasselblad 4/3 camera. Why does this matter? Well, you're probably going to be shooting with an ND filter to get motion blur the eye is accustomed to seeing when watching cinematic footage. If so, you don't have control over your shutter speed. Your shutter speed is now locked at 2 times the frame rate. So we don't have that lever to pull to adjust exposure when alternating between the 3 cameras. So we do not have a seamless experience when alternating between those 3 cameras. Complicating matters further is the question of color profiles. The only color profile that's shared across these 3 cameras is the normal color profile, and I would suggest that if you're buying this drone, you should not be looking to use the normal color profile. It's an 8-bit color profile, there's a contrasty saturated look baked on there, and there's digital sharpening applied. It's not a desirable option for higher end filmmakers. Now, if you have the £4,000 or £5,000 or dollar cine version, you can use the normal color profile in a 10-bit ProRes codec. I can't see why you would ever want to do that. The file sizes are absolutely enormous, and at the end of the day, that color profile is still baked on. For those of you new to this discussion, generally speaking, we want to shoot in a flatter color profile, gives us more flexibility in post, and we certainly want to take advantage of the 10-bit capabilities of the cameras. Let's look and see what else we get. How can we work around that? If we're talking about the Hasselblad and the medium telephoto camera, both of those cameras have the D-Log M color profile and the hybrid log gamma color profile. So my suggestion would be pick one of those, because at least you can alternate between those two color profiles seamlessly if you're planning on using the medium telephoto lens. But it gets even more complicated than that. The 24mm 4/3 primary camera on here also gives us access to a D-Log color profile. It's only available on the 4/3 camera, and it has a native ISO of 400. Now remember what I was saying about using ND filters and seamlessly changing between the cameras. Pick an ND filter that's going to work with your telephoto lens is set to 100 ISO. Then when we jump across to our primary camera, ISO jumps up to 400 if we're shooting the main D-Log color profile, but that's okay because we have a variable aperture on that camera. Crank it up to 5.6, 7.1, whatever's required to get a decent exposure. We can use that variable aperture to tweak our exposure to balance it with those other two cameras, and that way we can use the D-Log color profile on our primary camera and seamlessly move across to the medium telephoto lens, which might be shooting D-Log M, for example, and then move across to the telephoto lens, which is going to be shooting normal color profile because that's the only one it's got. But either way, that allows us to balance our exposure and use ND filters. I think the only issue I have is in terms of editing the footage. We don't have a good unified color profile across those three cameras. I don't know if it's possible, but I think the easiest solution in this instance is to put a 10-bit D-Log M color profile on the telephoto lens, and that way we can use D-Log M across all three cameras, which I should say is a fantastic color profile. Yes, if you're really getting into it, you might get a bit more out of D-Log, but this is kind of for the purists. D-Log M is a very, very good color profile, very flat. You can stretch it, play with it all you like as a more professional editor. 100 ISO unified across all three cameras, that makes the capture process a little bit more straightforward as well. Color profile considerations aside, the picture quality on all three cameras is absolutely fantastic. Now keep in mind the medium telephoto lens has the same sensor size as the Mini 3 Pro, and that camera produces gorgeous images. And if we get down to the telephoto lens that only has the 1/2-inch sensor, that's the same sensor size that the Mavic Air 2 has. The Mavic Air 2 produces stunning images. So I wouldn't get caught up too much in the fact these three cameras have different sensors. They all produce 4K images, and then the 4/3 camera at the bottom produces a 5.1K image. That's tons of resolution, and like I say, the image on all three cameras is fantastic. Coming back to the benefits of having longer telephoto focal lengths, it makes it easier for us to achieve shallow depth of field. Here at 70mm, you can see clear separation between me in focus and the background out of focus. For both the telephoto lenses here, the minimum focusing distance is 3 meters. Now that is a comfortable and safe distance to have from your living subject, a wedding couple for example. Now you can get a little bit of shallow depth of field with the 4/3 camera, but you need to get to the minimum focusing distance of about 1 meter to make that possible, and that's not a very comfortable distance from a subject. We now have access to 200 frames per second slow motion at 1080p, and as you can see, the shot is really, really good. We get quite a big crop, which I have to say can be good and bad, but in this instance, I think it looks absolutely great. I spent a lot of time out on the bike testing focus track, because the idea of telephoto focus track for me is beyond exciting. Focus track, of course, being a combination of active track, so when the drone follows the subject, spotlight when the drone acts essentially like a tripod up in the air with a cameraman rotating the camera around, and point of interest when we get orbits around our chosen subject. The 3x medium telephoto lens did a fantastic job on focus track, keeping me locked as a subject and the drone itself tracking me. And just like the other Mavic 3s, the optical avoidance on this thing is incredible. It's a bit wild at times keeping track of you, but you can be confident it's not going to crash into anything when using active track. To take advantage of the telephoto compression that we get with a 70mm equivalent field of view, try and get some rotational movement in your shots. That's when you start to see the layers in the frame sweep round, and you actually benefit from that focal length. As for the 7x telephoto camera, well, we don't get access to active track. I think that's too big an ask for the software, to be honest with you. How on earth can it track at that kind of focal length? That's hard going, but we do get access to spotlight and point of interest. Now, I did test both of those things. Didn't do a great job, if I'm honest. It basically lost me every single time. So I wonder if there's work to be done there in terms of improving the tracking at the 7x focal length. What I will say, however, this is all pre-release, early days for some of this stuff, so maybe things will have changed by the time this drone is actually hitting the market. Next question, what does this all cost to get access to those two telephoto cameras? Let's compare it with the Mavic 3 Classic. Now, slightly confusingly, the Mavic 3 Pro, both standard and Cine version, which has the ProRes codec and the 1TB internal hard drive, they're not being sold without controllers. You can't buy these on a standalone basis. So to compare alike with like, the cheapest entry point to the Mavic 3 Pro is buying the Mavic 3 Pro standard with the DJI RC. So that's the nice controller with the screen, the cheaper of the two. This is the RC Pro. You can get the RC, which is relatively inexpensive and I think very good value. So this drone standard version with the DJI RC is in US dollars $2,199, which is $450 more than the Mavic 3 Classic package that comes with the DJI RC. So $450 to get access to those two cameras. Given the intended customer base for the Mavic 3 Pro, I would say a 25% uplift on the Mavic 3 Classic to get access to two additional cameras is all right, to be honest with you. None of these drones are cheap. This is already quite a serious investment in what you're doing. So if you're planning on making some money, yeah, I think you can handle that. And just for some kind of comparison, think about what lenses cost for cameras, prime lenses. You buy a camera system like this Panasonic GH5, you then start adding lenses to it. These lenses can cost as much, if not more, than the cameras. Now, it's not an entirely fair comparison, but I think you get the point that I'm making. Like I said, neither the standard Mavic 3 Pro or the Mavic 3 Pro Cine are being sold on a standalone basis. I think that's a little bit of a shame. Both those drones are compatible with the RC N1 controller, the DJI RC and the DJI RC Pro. So let's say, for example, you're upgrading from a Mini 3 Pro, you already have the DJI RC, or you've gone out and bought the RC Pro, you're going to have to buy an additional controller with your new Mavic 3 Pro. Added to that, if you want to get the Mavic 3 Pro Cine, which gives you access to the ProRes codec and has a 1TB internal hard drive, you can only buy this drone in a combo. So you get the drone, you get the batteries, you get the charging hub, you get a very nice bag actually, which I think is quite a neat improvement on the previous bag. RC Pro, and that whole lot's quite expensive. So there's no way of getting access to this drone either without a controller or without the combination. So again, you could be upgrading from the original Mavic 3, for example. You've already got some batteries, you don't need the combo, and you might not need the controller. So maybe this changes over time, but as of today, that's the state of play for your purchasing decisions. As always, it's not for me to say whether or not you should buy this drone, but hopefully this discussion helps inform your decision. There's quite a lot of moving parts here. You'll put a different emphasis on different things. Not everybody is the same. So do get yourself a copy of our drone comparison chart in the link below. While you're at it, you'll see our free ebook, From Drone Zero to Drone Hero, 37 tips to get you flying like a filmmaker. You might even want to check out our 8 or 9 hour drone cinematography masterclass. All those links are below. Until next time, happy flying.